At 80 a.m. on December 29, 2022, Metropolitan Police prepared to raid 2 luxury apartments in London's financial district. What they found would expose how Britain's underworld had learned to hide in plain sight. From the outside, these Canary Wharf towers looked no different from hundreds of others. Sleek glass facades housing young professionals in one of the world's most expensive postcodes. But behind those apartment doors lay something extraordinary. A network that had been moving millions through Britain for years, using nothing more than shopping bags, encrypted messages, and a system built on complete invisibility. The officers preparing that morning weren't looking for drugs or weapons. They were hunting something far cleaner and far more dangerous. What they were about to uncover would draw investigators into a web of coded communications, fake transactions, and a money trail that stretched from Manchester to the heart of London's financial district. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled, methodical, and every part of it had been engineered to be undetectable. The network they were about to expose had perfected the art of moving dirty money through one of the world's most watched financial centers, and they'd been doing it for years without anyone noticing. But on that December morning, years of patient investigation were about to pay off, and the quiet operators running Britain's most sophisticated money laundering operation were about to discover that their invisible empire was about to become very visible indeed. When the first entry team breached the apartment on Biscayne Avenue, the scene appeared utterly ordinary. Tidy rooms, folded laundry, nothing out of place. But as Detective Constable Zach Rowe would later testify, ordinary was exactly what they'd been designed to look like. Welcome to UK True Crime Files. Let's dive in. Inside lived Xiao Yuyu Shu, 29, and Chi Wang, 28. 2 young professionals who, to their neighbors, seemed like typical Canary Wharf residents. But when officers began opening wardrobes and drawers, the carefully constructed facade crumbled. In one wardrobe, investigators found a carrier bag stuffed with £14,000 in cash, bundled tightly and labeled with handwritten notes in what appeared to be a crude accounting system. Alongside it sat cash-counting machines, money bags, and receipts showing previous collections that reached hundreds of thousands of pounds. But this was just the beginning. Across the same luxury complex, the second team was making an even more significant discovery. At Yunen Huang's nearby flat, the signs of large-scale cash handling were impossible to ignore. Machines for counting and sorting notes sat plugged in beside a makeshift workstation, still warm from recent use. On the table, officers discovered ledgers filled with handwritten logs, each entry recording amounts, dates, and coded initials that would later prove crucial to the investigation. The entries corresponded perfectly with figures recovered from phones seized in earlier North London raids, confirming that these luxury apartments were central collection points in something much larger. By the time both searches were complete, police had seized close to £500,000 in assets, cash, equipment, and financial records that painted a picture of a parallel banking system operating within some of London's most expensive residential buildings. But the most important discovery wasn't the money. It was the digital trail that would lead them to the man controlling it all. The connection to him wasn't immediate. It emerged from the painstaking analysis of encrypted messages found on seized phones during those earlier East London raids. Forensic teams scrolling through thousands of communications found one account that appeared repeatedly in transaction logs, a username written in Mandarin that translated to, "There is a big sun in the sky." This wasn't just another participant. This was an organizer, someone giving instructions, confirming amounts, and managing couriers without ever naming them. The tone of the messages was chillingly professional, never personal, written with the kind of clinical efficiency that resembled a corporate accountant more than a criminal mastermind. But who was behind the username? digital forensics began piecing together fragments of evidence. Serial numbers of banknotes photographed and sent through the app matched cash later seized in raids across London. Phone metadata revealed patterns of communication that pointed decisively northward, to Manchester. The man they were hunting was Chi Wang, 29 years old, living quietly in a riverside apartment on the left bank. He had no criminal record, no visible wealth, and no reason to draw attention. To his neighbors, he was just another young professional working from home. Yet over the course of 3 years, detectives would learn that this unremarkable man was controlling the movement of more than £55 million through Britain's capital and beyond. Wang operated like a remote manager from his Manchester apartment, coordinating cash pickups across London with the precision of a logistics company. He never met his couriers face-to-face, never handled the money directly, and never left a paper trail that could connect him to the operation. If investigations like this fascinate you, there's much more to uncover. Consider subscribing for more deep-dive cases. But the question that would drive the entire investigation remained: how exactly did £55 million move through Britain without touching a single bank account? The structure Wang had built was a masterpiece of compartmentalization. Each person knew only their part, creating a system where the whole could function even if individual pieces were compromised. Among his key operatives were Xiao Yuyu Shu and Yinying Wang, both based in those Canary Wharf towers we've already seen raided. They acted as collectors, receiving large amounts of British pounds from unknown sources, sometimes £250,000 in a single collection. To anyone watching, they looked like busy young professionals handling legitimate business transactions. Working alongside them was Yunen Huang, also operating from the same luxury complex. His flat was fitted with counting machines and bags for sorting cash, transforming a high-end residential apartment into a sophisticated money processing center. But the network extended far beyond Canary Wharf. 2 more operatives, Peng Lu and Ang Li, ran what appeared to be an unregistered money service business from Peninsula Square, just a few miles away. Their role was to handle smaller transfers and keep the flow of cash steady when larger shipments were delayed. They provided the operational flexibility that kept the entire system running smoothly. In Manchester, Wang had additional support. Ruolan Chen helped him manage records and coordinate collections, ensuring that the digital side of the operation remained as organized as the physical cash handling in London. The genius of this structure was its invisibility. Shu and Wang never met the people they collected cash from, and those handing it over never knew who would ultimately receive it. The system ensured transactions could occur without names, signatures, or any risk of identification. For detectives building their case, the structure looked complete, a network engineered to leave no trace, but they still faced the crucial question that would determine whether they could secure convictions. How exactly did the money move, and who was paying for it? The answer would lead them into a system that blurred the line between legitimate business and sophisticated crime. At the heart of the operation was a brilliantly simple idea: use people with lawful access to foreign currency to exchange value without ever touching the formal banking system. The gang relied on a popular Chinese messaging platform to broker deals, private chats where offers were posted, amounts confirmed, and collection points arranged. These messages read like business instructions: sums, times, and a single verification method that replaced every personal detail. Here's how it worked in practice. Chinese students and other clients in China wanted British pounds, but were constrained by strict capital controls. China limits personal outward transfers to roughly $50,000 per year. To circumvent this, the students sent yuan into designated accounts in China controlled by the network. Simultaneously, in the UK, Wang's couriers supplied the agreed amount in sterling to the students or their representatives. No cross-border bank transfer linked payer to payee. No wire trail tied a British pickup to a Chinese deposit. Instead, the exchange was completed entirely within the network itself. But how did they verify these transactions without names or bank records? The verification method was deliberately low-tech and highly secure. Each pickup was confirmed by a photograph of a single £5 note showing its unique serial number. That image moved through the encrypted chat to the next participant and acted as proof of exchange. When the recipient came to collect their cash, the courier compared serial numbers. Only when they matched was the transaction considered complete. The method removed the need for names, bank accounts, or receipts. It reduced every interaction to a code and an image. Records recovered later showed a steady flow of consignments over years. Each transaction logged in Wang's internal ledger rather than any regulated account. The system was invisible to banks, invisible to regulators, and nearly invisible to law enforcement. Yet as flawless as it seemed, every message and every photograph left a digital fingerprint. And it was only a matter of time before those fingerprints found their way to the police. The story didn't begin with encrypted messages or sophisticated raids. It started quietly in early 2020 when local officers in North London began noticing something that didn't quite fit. The same names kept appearing on different cash declarations. The same streets surfaced repeatedly in unrelated reports of suspicious financial activity. None of it was overtly criminal, but it didn't match the profile of legitimate business either. Detective Constable Zach Rowe and his team at Stoke Newington were already familiar with small-scale underground banking, informal money transfers, often set up to help communities move funds between the UK and abroad, weren't uncommon in diverse London neighbourhoods. But what caught their attention was the volume and frequency. Cash collections were happening several times a week, always by different individuals, always to similar addresses in Canary Wharf and East London. The figures involved were substantial, sometimes exceeding what an entire small business might handle in a month. The early months of 2020 provided an unexpected advantage. London's pandemic restrictions meant much of the city was unusually quiet, making the continued movement of couriers stand out even more. While legitimate businesses struggled with lockdown limitations, this network seemed to operate with remarkable consistency. Officers began building quiet intelligence around what they suspected could be an organized Fei Qian operation, a traditional Chinese underground banking method, literally meaning flying money. Through careful surveillance, plainclothes officers watched couriers arrive at residential buildings carrying ordinary shopping bags or small suitcases. They entered quickly, left within minutes, and blended back into the crowd. The activity appeared routine enough to avoid casual attention, but when analysts compared these movements with CCTV footage and banking reports, patterns emerged. The same addresses kept reappearing, always linked to large deposits or unexplained money handovers. What had started as a handful of suspicious movements was beginning to reveal something far more organized. By late 2020, DC Rowe's team had flagged the behavior to the Metropolitan Police's Economic Crime Unit, and the patient work of building a case against Britain's most sophisticated money laundering network had officially begun. By December 2022, months of intelligence work, data tracing, and financial analysis had led investigators to those 2 luxury apartments in Canary Wharf. But the raids that morning would exceed even their expectations. The first team approached Biscayne Avenue at precisely 8 a.m. Inside, they found Xiao Yuyu Xu and Ying Wang, who appeared cooperative but offered minimal information when questioned. Neither admitted to knowing the true identity of the man giving them orders through encrypted channels. But it was the physical evidence that told the real story. The £14,000 in cash was just the beginning. Investigators also discovered detailed ledgers showing transactions worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, each entry corresponding perfectly with digital records recovered from earlier phone seizures. Across the complex, the search of Yunen Huang's flat revealed an even more sophisticated operation. The cash-counting machines were still plugged in, suggesting recent use, while handwritten logs on the workstation recorded amounts, dates, and coded initials that would prove crucial to building the prosecution case. The combined seizures from both addresses totaled close to £500,000 in assets. But more importantly, the digital evidence pointed decisively toward Manchester. Within weeks, detectives had secured a warrant for an apartment in Left Bank, Manchester, registered to Chi Wang, and when officers entered, the true scale of the operation finally became clear. Inside were rows of electronic devices, mobile phones, SIM cards, computers, and bank cards issued under other people's names. On Wang's desk sat a cash counting machine, its rollers still dusted with the residue of recent use. But the most critical discovery was documentation. Digital and printed ledgers recording consignments over years, showing the movement of more than £55 million through the system. Wang was arrested at the scene, and with his detention, the invisible empire that had operated undetected for 3 years was finally exposed. The evidence was overwhelming, but the legal process was just beginning. By the summer of 2024, the case had reached Snaresbrook Crown Court, and the 7 defendants faced judgment for their roles in what prosecutors described as one of Britain's most sophisticated money laundering operations. The trial was methodical. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that told the story of an invisible financial empire. Digital records, encrypted messages, cash seizures, and witness testimony painted a picture of a network that had operated with corporate-level precision. Chi Wang, the 29-year-old controller from Manchester, stood at the center of it all. The man who had coordinated the movement of £55 million from his riverside apartment without ever meeting his operatives face-to-face. The sentences reflected the scale and sophistication of the operation. Wang received 12 years imprisonment for conspiracy to launder money and operating an unregistered money service business, the longest sentence of the group, recognizing his role as the network's architect and controller. Xiao Yuyu Shu, the 29-year-old collector from Canary Wharf, was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months, while Yunen Huang, whose flat had served as a cash processing center, received 3 years and 4 months. Ruolan Chen, Wang's Manchester-based assistant, who had helped maintain records and coordinate transactions, was jailed for 2 years, her sentence reflecting her supporting but crucial role in the operation's logistics. Peng Lu and Ang Li, who had run the unregistered money service business from Peninsula Square, were each sentenced to 18 months for their roles in maintaining the network's operational flexibility. Yinying Wang, who had shared the Biscayne Avenue address with Shu, received 11 months for possession of criminal property, the shortest sentence, reflecting her more limited involvement. The collective total of 24 years and 11 months marked the formal dismantling of a network that had operated in plain sight for years. Detective Constable Zach Rowe, speaking outside court after the final hearing, described the sentencing as having eviscerated a professional gang of international launderers, a rare admission of just how sophisticated and disciplined the operation had been. What's your take on these sentences? Were they appropriate for the scale of the operation? Share your thoughts below. But this wasn't the only network operating in Britain's shadows. While Chi Wang's network was reaching its peak in 2022, another sophisticated operation had already risen and fallen, one that would prove to be a blueprint for the larger Chinese networks that followed. At the center of this earlier operation was Yong Hen Jin, a 36-year-old French national living in Manchester. To the outside world, he appeared ordinary, a well-dressed man who traveled frequently and kept his dealings discreet. But beneath that calm exterior, he was coordinating the movement of hundreds of thousands of pounds using a different but equally effective method. His wife, Xiao Kenu, a German national, played a vital supporting role. She managed communications and logistics, ensuring exchanges were properly timed and cash reached its destination without delay. Fluent in multiple languages and methodical in her approach, she acted as Jin's operational backbone. Supporting them was Marcel Mo, an Albanian national based in Chelsea. Mo was a courier who understood how to operate in public, yet remain unnoticed, collecting and delivering large volumes of cash using everyday settings as cover for complex financial exchanges. The fourth member, Luis Matos Gardner, a 48-year-old Spanish national from Chesterfield, provided the mobility that held the system together. He handled transport between locations, ensuring cash moved quickly and cleanly from one meeting to the next. Unlike the digital sophistication of Wang's later network, this operation relied on physical control and personal trust. But it was that reliance on face-to-face meetings that would ultimately prove their downfall. By late 2016, National Crime Agency surveillance teams had begun noticing patterns in cash movements that defied explanation. Large amounts circulating through London without any digital footprint, no bank transactions, no paper trail. On a cold November morning, they watched as Jin arrived at a North London hotel car park. What looked like an ordinary business meeting was about to expose the mechanics of professional money laundering. When NCA officers moved in and stopped Jin as he walked toward the hotel entrance, the contents of his suitcase told the story. £420,000 in bundled cash, packed and labelled, ready for redistribution. But the operation was far from over. Fast forward to July 1st, 2024. Evening rush hour on London's Victoria Line, one of the busiest periods of the day. Hundreds of commuters packed underground, phones in hand, scrolling through messages as train doors slid open and closed. Then, almost simultaneously, devices across multiple carriages began to vibrate. A text flashed on screens from what appeared to be a legitimate courier service. Your shipment has been suspended due to missing address details. Click here to update. For most passengers, it was merely an annoyance. But for one observant commuter, it was something far more sinister. That passenger noticed something unusual on the platform at Victoria Station. A man stood waiting beside a large green suitcase, but he wasn't traveling. He wasn't checking arrival boards or boarding any train. He was simply watching, and the fraudulent message had appeared on phones at the exact moment he was standing there. The man's name was Kongji Chen, 31 years old. Dressed neatly, appearing calm and patient. But what his suitcase contained had nothing to do with luggage or legitimate travel. When British Transport Police arrived and examined the case, they discovered a battery pack connected by wires to a metal circuit box, its indicator light glowing green with a small black antenna still transmitting. To trained technicians, it was immediately recognizable as a portable SMS blaster, also known as a fake cell tower or stingray device. The system had been engineered to mimic a real mobile signal, tricking nearby phones into connecting automatically. Once connected, it flooded them with preloaded fraudulent messages, completely bypassing network security and spam filters. As officers examined the equipment, one felt his own phone buzz, the same fake parcel alert, proof that he too had been within range of the broadcast. Data extracted later revealed that over 165 identical messages had been sent between 2:38 p.m. and 10:37 p.m. that day. Chen had deployed a self-contained, battery-powered transmission unit capable of sending thousands of texts within minutes. operating entirely outside the control of major phone networks and exploiting vulnerabilities in older 2G signals that most phones still automatically connect to. It was a stark reminder that as traditional money laundering networks were being dismantled, criminals were evolving, adapting new technologies to old crimes, and finding fresh ways to exploit Britain's financial systems. When Kong Ji Chen appeared at Inner London Crown Court in October 2024, his case represented more than just a single fraud attempt. It highlighted how financial crime in Britain had evolved from the hotel car park cash exchanges of 2016 to the sophisticated digital networks of 2022, and now to real-time cyber attacks on London's transport system. Chen pleaded guilty to possessing an article for use in fraud and received 24 weeks imprisonment. A relatively short sentence, but one that carried a sharp message about the seriousness with which courts now view technology-enabled financial crime. Detective Constable Adrienne Curzon of British Transport Police credited the vigilance of that single commuter who raised the alarm. Without that moment of public awareness, Chen's SMS blaster could have continued operating undetected, potentially reaching thousands more victims across London's underground network. But these three cases, Jin's physical cash operation, Wang's encrypted digital network, and Chen's cyber attack, reveal something crucial about the evolution of financial crime in modern Britain. Each operation adapted to the security measures of its time. When face-to-face meetings became too risky, criminals moved to encrypted messaging. When banking surveillance improved, they bypassed banks entirely. When traditional fraud detection caught SMS scams, they built their own transmission networks. The sophistication is remarkable. Wang's network moved £55 million using nothing more than shopping bags and £5 note serial numbers. Chen's device could flood hundreds of phones with fraudulent messages from a single suitcase. Both operations were designed to be completely invisible to traditional law enforcement methods. Yet in each case, it was human observation that proved decisive. Local officers noticing patterns in North London, a transport police investigation following suspicious behavior, an alert commuter who trusted their instincts on a crowded platform. The challenge for law enforcement is clear. As criminals become more sophisticated, the importance of public vigilance and inter-agency cooperation becomes even more critical. These networks don't operate in isolation. They adapt, evolve, and learn from each other's successes and failures. The question isn't whether new networks will emerge. It's how quickly they'll be detected and whether Britain's financial crime defences can evolve as rapidly as the criminals they're designed to catch. These cases reveal something profound about the nature of modern financial crime. It's no longer the domain of obvious criminals operating from obvious locations. Today's money launderers are young professionals living in luxury apartments, using encrypted messaging apps and exploiting the very technologies designed to make our lives more convenient. Chi Wang controlled £55 million from a riverside apartment in Manchester. Yong Hen Jin moved hundreds of thousands through hotel car parks. Kong Ji Chen turned a London underground platform into a cyber attack launch point. Each operated in plain sight, using Britain's openness and connectivity against itself. The sentences handed down: 24 years and 11 months for Wang's network, 11 years and 10 months for Jin's operation, 24 weeks for Chen's cyber attack, reflect not just the scale of individual crimes, but the growing recognition that financial crime threatens the integrity of Britain's entire economic system. Detective Constable Zach Rowe's description of eviscerating a professional gang of international launderers wasn't hyperbole. It was an acknowledgement that modern financial crime requires the same level of sophistication from law enforcement that criminals bring to their operations. But perhaps the most important lesson from these cases is the role of public awareness. The commuter who noticed Chen's suspicious behavior, the local officers who spotted patterns in North London, the investigators who refused to dismiss seemingly minor anomalies. In an age where financial crime can be controlled from encrypted apps and executed through fake cell towers, the human element, observation, instinct, and the willingness to report what doesn't feel right remains our most powerful defense. These networks may have been dismantled, but others are already adapting, learning, and evolving. The question is whether we'll be ready for them. For more deep investigations into how financial crime really works in modern Britain, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because understanding these systems is the first step in defending against them. What's your take on how these networks manage to stay hidden for so long? Share your thoughts below. And if you found this investigation valuable, consider sharing it with others who need to understand how Britain's financial underworld really operates.